Do you have a child that is gender confused? Are you the parent of somebody that is either identified as transgender using different pronouns or some other type of gender confused, just propaganda that's being shoved down your kids' throats? Well, I created the Biblically Parenting Gender Confused Children support group for parents just like you. This support group is completely free. We meet monthly, and you are able to connect with other like minded Christian parents that are struggling with how to parent children that are gender confused. They're getting all sorts of nonsense brought to them by the world, and I want to help connect parents that are going through similar struggles and be able to tackle this issue through a biblical worldview. If you are interested in joining this group or know somebody that might be interested in this group, head on over to faithfullyengaged.com and there's more information about the support group there. I have a link down in the description below. Right. Well, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Faithfully Engaged. As many of you know that have been listening to the show for a while, I really like having authors on that are writing books or have written a book already. I just find it so intriguing getting to know their mind through the writing process and why their book is so interesting. So, got another new author here. Her name is Dawn Irons. So, Dawn, it's great to have you on. And why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm a counselor educator at Liberty, and I've been in private practice for about 14 years and just really have had a passion for pouring into and raising up the next generation of counselors because they're on the front line of things we were never trained or even could have imagined that we're seeing, but it's front and center now. And so there's a really great opportunity to be working with these interns and associates now.
Well, Dawn, many in the audience have heard me talk about this before, and I've had Soed on before, and also Pamela on that are kind of in our, I kind of called our little underground conservative counselor group online. That's just our own, to kind of use the vernacular, our safe space. That's kind of more in a joking manner in that way, but just of conservative counselors, because that's not a very common thing in our field. So tell us a little bit about, like you said, your training was different than how new counselors training up in the field are now. So those that maybe aren't aware of some of the dynamics in counseling training, what's so different from your training to maybe people in college right now?
And I was a late bloomer. I mean, I didn't even start my master's until I was in my 40s, and my doctorate, I was 49 going into 50. But I mean, just the difference in those two time spans. Um, when I was doing my master's work, issues in the LGBT community and training, that was just a natural part of all multicultural because we're going to encounter these clients. But the difference of when I first started, I mean, multicultural covered truly all areas, races, ethnicities, religions, um, the LGBT. I mean, it was a broad spectrum. And when I went back for my doctorate, it's like everything was reduced down to LGBT. I mean, that and racial issues. Everything that was across the board of multicultural training was reduced down to two issues, and it wasn't even just the reduction of it; it was how rabid it was. And then we saw the rise of critical race theory, which, I mean, from the get go, if you are white, you are bigot, period. And, where do you go from there? I mean, then you start getting into issues of the ACA Code of Ethics, where, part of multicultural competence is knowledge of self and others. And they have, in their definitions, embedded in their definitions, are a political identity, a religious identity, and that there are protections for those groups as well or equal to those of the LGBT community. But that's been some of the starkest differences that I've seen, is just how militant and, gosh, fill in the blanks of the words that would describe all that goes with that. And just how I guess what is most disturbing to me is how they have taken two federally protected classes of people and almost pit them against each other. And there's just a solid war, it seems like, between the LGBT community and religious and spiritual communities.
Hmm. No, that's a very good point. And let's kind of get on more on the religious side of things. Um, yeah, how do you see that being an issue, especially for, let's say, for a Christian client, so somebody that has Christian beliefs? Doesn't have to just be Christian, but we'll stick with that. Um, and maybe they're going to a counselor, and that counselor is like super staunchly LGBT stuff. Maybe has the gay pride flag in their office or whatever. Why is that an issue? Why would that be such a big deal for somebody that upholds kind of those traditional beliefs? Why might that be so detrimental for them?
I mean, at the core, when you look at the research of what are the most important ideological factors in terms of identity for people, the vast majority of people had said that their religious beliefs were the most important or salient in their personal lives in terms of identity. Even when you broke it down into racial groups, African Americans said that their race was not near as important to them as their religious beliefs. And so, among a community of believers, we don't break it down into you're black, I'm white. I mean, it really is that common faith that holds them together. And I mean, yes, we see color differences because it's part of a beautiful tapestry, cultural differences, but it's the thing that unites us in Christ that makes the difference. And I mean, I've actually started to tell people, because, if I'm personal friends with somebody, I can't counsel them. But when I tell them and they're asking me for referrals of where they could go, I mean, I'm pretty hard lines. Like, you've got to do your research because I know where you're coming from. And I know that if you just roll the dice on Psychology Today, 99% of the time, you're going to get somebody that will absolutely abhor who you are at your core. And so do your research. I mean, and there's tons of research out there that Christians in general will forego getting therapy at all if they cannot find a counselor that will understand their cultural viewpoint from a religious standpoint. And that makes a whole lot of sense. So, in some ways, they already intuitively know that counseling can be a dangerous thing if it's not with the right person. But I mean, with everything that I've seen, I mean, I now feel the need to warn people because
Hmm.
they really don't know what we're seeing on the academic side of this ideology that is coming in. And even when I get student interns or associates that are working on their hours for their license, I feel like, I mean, I have to spend pretty much the first 6 months untraining what they learned in school because it's that bad. It's just that bad.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it kind of leads on a, I mean, it's negative, but positive on my end. That one of my favorite things in my counseling practice is giving referrals. I get all the time people that find my counseling website. They're like, man, we've been searching for somebody that has Christian beliefs, or does just isn't like outwardly leftist in some of their ideals, especially when it comes to some of the trans issues with kids and things of that nature. And even though I don't even see them as a client, like the fact that I in our group and everything, and just connecting with others, to find counselors that would be a good fit for them in a different state or whatever. I love doing that. I love providing that service for people. But on the same token, I wish it wasn't really needed that much. I wish it wasn't so difficult for
And,
that to
and
happen.
that's a big transition, like I said, from 2011 when I finished my master's. I mean, there was a much more even keeled group. I mean, you could find a secular counselor that would still respect your cultural identity. Somewhere in these 15 years, there's been a rise of social justice that comes in through the counseling training programs now. And as much as I'm an advocate, I mean, I'm born that way, I am wired that way. There's something antithetical about that when it comes to counseling, in my mind, in that, yes, we do stand for things, but when you get a client walking in the door, you don't know what their issues are, what their beliefs are. And there's got to be, if I am already set in my mind that I will correct you if you're wrong, I mean, that defeats the whole counseling relationship, because it's not about what it has become. And I mean, I'm trying to be very careful with words here. Um, it, I just think there's a huge problem when you have activists that are working with clients, because if that client doesn't have a similar view, there is an attempt in the name of social justice to correct or train or redirect them, which is just not therapeutic.
Absolutely. I think that's another big piece of this too, especially those of you that aren't really knowledgeable about the counseling field or haven't been in counseling yourself. There's a difference, and in fact, in my own counseling practice, I go above and beyond when I'm coming from a Christian counseling perspective. That informed consent. I take that extremely importantly. I have things lined out. I even have like a statement of faith in there, and line it out of, hey, you don't even have to agree with this. I'm not asking you to agree with it, but I want you to understand this is what you're getting yourself into. And if you don't want that, that's okay. We'll find you something else, or maybe we can tailor the counseling to be a little bit different, maybe a little less faith-based. But that informed consent is massive. The client has to be seeking that out and want that. And the big thing is that a lot of these activist type of counselors out there, that's people aren't signing up for it. They're just getting it, whether they want it or not, and are being directed in a certain way. And that, like I said, is extremely antithetical to the whole nature of counseling. That it doesn't serve a purpose at that point.
I mean, it's a lot of time and money to spend to be insulted.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I agree. I think informed consent really is the answer to the whole problem. We didn't pit ourselves against an LGBT community. They didn't pit themselves against us, but our training programs have. and
Yeah.
and I think if given the opportunity with true informed consent, I mean, like you, I have a statement of faith on my website. The ACA Code of Ethics says that our clients have a right to know certain things about us. And I think this is something you've got a right to know before you make a decision on whether I'm a good fit. I don't have to make the choice of whether you're a good fit for me. I need to give you the information so you can make that choice. And I mean, I've had tons of LGBT clients, but not one of them in 15 years has ever come to me for an LGBT issue. And if that's not their presenting issue, I'm not going to go there. I keep in mind that is a cultural factor with them. But if they're coming to me for depression or anxiety, I'm not going to make their sex life a point of the process, because I wouldn't do that with a straight person. and
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are layers of protection in that you put your statement of faith out there. I have an informed consent that, do you want to discuss religious or worldview issues in your counseling that are important to you? Yes or no. I know before I walk in that room if they're open. And I've only ever that I can really recall had one person that said no, thank you, and I honored that. But I've never had to quote Exodus chapter 20 to tell a couple that the affair is not going to help your marriage. Principles are principles, and I don't have to quote a chapter and a verse to put that on the table. And I remember one time I had a very staunch atheist, and he really wanted no part, and so I'm curious. I'm like, so just curious, why did you choose me? He says, we're in rural America. You were my only choice. And I'm like, that's fair. That is fair. And we worked for almost a year. And at the end of it, he's like, I got to tell you, you're not at all what I thought I would get with the Christian counselor. And I'm like, well, tell me about that. And he says, at no point did I ever feel like you judged me. I said, I did my job. My job is to love you, to go where you need to go, and to help you live a safe and healthy life. He goes, but I just wasn't expecting that.
Mm.
And, he goes, so why do you believe what you believe? And I'm like, well, okay, after a year, he's gained my trust. Now he's asking
Mm.
me why I believe what I believe. And I can give him my 5-minute elevator speech of why. But at no point did I say, now, would you like to accept Christ as
Mm.
no. I know
Yeah.
who I'm talking to, but he wanted to know more. So it was a neat moment. But I think truly, when you give people true informed consent, I mean, if the relationship isn't started with honesty, it's not going to go anywhere good anyway. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm a huge fan of that informed consent and letting people make their choices. And by that same token, I've never had a gay couple come to me, because I think too, it's respect, giving them the information. They're probably saying, that's probably not the best fit for us. But
Mm.
they made that choice. I didn't. And I would be
Right.
uncomfortable if they chose to go forward, because it's not my specialty. But I think it is a mutual respect with the informed consent, because a lot of people would not invest the time or money into something that they know is going to be a conflict. But I think instead of putting that burden on the counselors, you give that respect to the client to
Mm.
say, here's the information you need to know about us. And so,
Yeah. And as you say, it's respect. We as most counselors, we respect our clients. We think well of them. We don't think they're stupid and they can't figure things out on their own. Yeah, if a gay couple or whoever wants to get help on their marriage, then somebody that has a statement of faith of things that are very biblical in nature, yeah, it's not going to be a good fit for them. And like I said, that's respect. That's showing to them, hey, this isn't going to be the best fit, but there's going to be plenty of other people that are. And for those that are more left leaning, that are counselors, those that are more upfront with it, and again are more informed consent with that, I may still really disagree with you, but at least you're giving that client, again, that respect of what they're getting into. What I have a problem with is when somebody does come in for depression. I actually had some recent clients that complain about older clients that are older counselors that, yeah, we're just digging in to their faith of why it was wrong or whatever. They didn't sign up for that. They didn't sign up to have their faith deconstructed on site or whatever it may be. They signed up to deal with their depression, and that's a huge problem and something that absolutely needs to be addressed.
yeah, and I do. I think the research, when it shows the top reasons that clients file board or ethics complaint against counselors, it's a cultural issue. And so religious clients that are experiencing that social justice backlash based on their faith, it's like those counselors need to understand, this isn't always about a racial issue. It's about a cultural issue. And until you can embrace that a religious or spiritual belief is a cultural identity, then you probably ought not try to recorrect and social justice them into whatever worldview you think they need to have, because those are the number one reasons board and ethical complaints get filed.
Absolutely. Which, like you said, that's a massive part. I'm thinking of in my life. If I have a family member or somebody that's requesting counseling and I'm given a referral, yeah, that's something we look at. We don't want their faith to be downtrodden on just because they're dealing with a difficult life circumstance. And yeah, ethical complaints, they
Yeah.
should be levied in those situations.
And it
Now,
always interested me during well, I was at a Christian college in my master's program. My doctoral program, 99% of it was in a secular college. And because of the religious discrimination against my dissertation, I transferred after my first year of dissertation to another school to be able to finish, because they decided to put me through 2 rounds of student development for re-education about why my topic was not acceptable. And I'm like, I'm out. But
yeah.
at the secular school, I mean, there was from the get go, religion was a bad thing. It was just, I remember our first assignment in our ethics class, we had to all post our resumes. Well, normally that probably would not be a big deal for most people, but I was very intentional about my education choices. um, my bachelor's and my master's were both at small Christian colleges. My clinical rotation was at a faith-based hospital. I did my internship at a private practice Christian counseling center. And so that pit of my stomach when I knew I was going to have to put that out there for an entire class to comment on, ugh, it
Mhm.
was a moment. And I mean, within a few weeks of that, it was right when the Supreme Court had upheld the Colorado cake baker case.
Mhm.
And it was a class discussion. And I had said, in the long term, this may have implications for the counseling profession, because the court upheld that you could not force a person to violate their faith, even in a work situation. And one of my classmates called the ACA ethics board on me because I expressed that opinion in class. And, first of all, that was the assignment, to share your thoughts and beliefs on this current event. And so I remember contacting the professor, and it's like, you need to address this issue or I will, because I did the assignment. I should never have had, for completing a course assignment, to have an ethics board called on me. But the amazing thing is, and this is where you learn, the ACA has zero power if you're not a member. And I have not been, nor ever will be, a member of the ACA. And I'm fortunate to live in a very red state in Texas. We don't even adhere to the ACA Code of Ethics. We have our own state legislative counseling code. And, the ACA tries to flex a big muscle, but, and even at the school level, they required that all counseling students be a member of the ACA. And I remember contacting my professors, like, I'm having some financial concerns right now. This is not something I feel that I can do right now. He's like, no problem, just do it at some point. And I'm like, okay. Didn't have the heart to tell him my financial concern was, I cannot give that organization money. They don't represent me. And so when she made her complaint, probably assuming I was a member, but the ACA is powerless. And truly, when you think about how they flex that muscle to show that they're the national organization, well, between the 50 continental states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, so of 52 jurisdictions, only 19 states adhere to the ACA Code of Ethics. 33 states have opted out completely, and the majority of those 33 states have upheld Religious Freedom Reformation Acts to protect counselors. And so the ACA, when you really start stacking it up to the facts, I mean, they're not the Goliath they're presenting themselves to be, for sure.
And you bring up a good point here too of like, yes, there's bad stuff going on in counseling profession. There's bad stuff going on in other professions as well. But Christians, conservatives, sometimes we back ourselves into a corner of the kind of the woe is me, like things are just horrible, terrible. Again, there's an extent of that we don't need to live in, sunshine and roses and unicorn land or whatever, that everything's perfect. No, there's issues, but they're not all the big bad people out there. Like, there's sometimes some finessing, some strategy, some ways that that's part of why I like kind of our conservative counselor group to kind of be hand in hand together and have realize that we're not alone. Like, there's ways to navigate. It's just you have to be wise of how you step. And that kind of leads me into of again, these are all fantastic things that we're talking about, but you've taken some of this to the next step of not just being upfront talking and maybe in your classes about it or with colleagues, but also writing about some of these issues, writing a book. So kind of just tell us a little bit of about what your book is about and why you decided to put pen to paper there.
Okay, so I had been basically doing the conference rounds, being invited to speak at some different conferences, and I was always amazed when I was done how much people would come up and say they had no idea this was going on in the profession. And I get it. I'm on the academic side of it. I see what's going on through the training programs, and I've had the opportunity to see it at a secular school and the world of difference at a faith-based school. And I mean, but when you think about it, your average clinician, I mean, their focus is their client. They're in there doing research on client issues, outcomes, strategies for success in the client. And so really they're not paying attention. They're not looking back to what's going on in the training programs. And so the more I became unaware that the average counselor didn't know what was going on. And if they don't go into becoming a supervisor, they're not even going to see it in the next generation of counselors because they're client focused, which we should be. But realizing just how many people didn't know, I thought, we need to have a wake up call, or we're going to wake up 6 feet under in terms of being able to fight for a religious and spiritual population in the midst of this social justice war that has clearly called that population the enemy. So it really became at that point, it felt like a moral imperative. It's that, first of all, they wanted to know, they just didn't know. And, where can I get my hands on this information? Well, I mean, I had 5 years of putting a dissertation together. This was the air I breathed for 5 years. And I mean, it comes out of me as natural as breathing. And unless they're going to go do the research I did for 5 years, they're not going to just know where to find it. I mean, I had to go look for it in over 20 years of research. But I thought this is one way to make it very practical, hands-on. Here's the big picture and here's the research. And we need to wake up as a profession of religious and spiritual counselors of what's going on around us. We need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, but we do need to be aware. We have to walk in wisdom and discernment to know the surrounding of the field that we're in, because it's not just friendly territory.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I really appreciate the courage and practical nature there of, hey, let's not wait for somebody else to do this. I've done this work. I know what this is. Yeah, I'm not going to wait for somebody else to do it. Like I'm going to put it out there. And
Yeah.
as you've been doing this research, as you've been doing this writing, certainly don't expect you to, to write or to tell us everything that's in the book, but especially for somebody that's in a either a counselor that is religious, Christian based, like I am, or just somebody that's really passionate about kind of the cause that you're talking about. What are some of those wise steps that a counselor could take to protect themselves while still standing for religious rights?
My big thing is layers of protection. Like I say, put that statement of faith out there and let clients have informed consent, so you're not creating a surprise shock factor. Well, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have come here. Put it out there, make it known. Um, I think being involved in Christian organizations, because there's only so much we can do at an individual level, but organizations like the American Association of Christian Counselors, faith-based organization, and they have connections with um, legal defense issues such as the Alliance Defending Freedom. They've taken several counseling cases up to the Supreme Court level. So when you've got organizations like that working together, it's easier to partner with them and get the education of what's going on. The legal protection, if you need it, is there. Um, and then there's other organizations. The Association of Mental Health Professionals, they're also a faith based organization, and they provide CEU training. Again, that for a faith based person, I mean, I will never attend an ACA conference because I'm not going to spend that much money for the conference plus the travel and a rental car to be insulted and humiliated. I'm just not going to do it. But the AMHP, their CEUs are coming from a non-woke perspective and addressing, I mean, you're going to get LGBT training, you're going to get trans issues that are going on, but from a clinical standpoint, that is not saying let's go mutilate our children. um, you're going to hear the other side of that coin. um, I think the best thing that has ever happened recently is the leak of the WPATH files on the transgender issues, because, I mean, that was a gift. I mean, when you've got the mental health, psychiatrists, counselors, and the medical doctors creating the standards of care for gender medicine, admitting and vocally saying that they know these people do not have informed consent, they do not understand the long-term effects, and that they're going ahead and doing it anyway. And then when they start to get caught being sued by those who are detransitioning, their response, I mean, and that they were openly talking about, well, clients just need to own their choices. But you just said they don't understand the implications of what you're doing. And so, I mean, that was a gift. But the AMHP and their CEU training are they're addressing those, and that's just not something you're going to find in your average CE training. And so, really connecting with faith-based organizations for your professional memberships, I think, is essential.
Absolutely. And I think that that mindset is applicable outside of counseling. And maybe you're in some other profession, like, I don't know if this relates to me. It does. This is there. Things like this are happening in professions all across the country, all across the world, and you need to, one, be wise to kind of the dynamics, kind of the power plays that are going on, that yeah, you are there's some bad people out there, bad organizations that are trying to railroad you and make you out to be the bad guy based off your values. And you need to be aware that that's happening, but don't go off and live in a bunker. I think that's something that those more on the right, and Christian side of things,
You know,
sometimes go ahead.
oh, it's like, and that's the thing. We live in a country where 75% of our population claims some form of Christian belief, another 12 to 13%, another world religion. So if you're looking at 85% of a population in the country, you're going to have 8 or 9 people walking in your door out of 10 that are going to have a religious and spiritual worldview. And if you're not trained in how to deal with that, or that you are counter trained in to correct that belief system or to address it, I mean, come on. And so
Yeah.
there are more of us than there are of them. And I think we do have to find our voice in that, because right now there is such a backlash against conservative thinking or religious thinking within the field, but there's still more of us than there are of them. And we've
Mm-hmm.
got to quit being that silent majority and start standing up, because at the end of the day, it really is about client care. And
Right.
I mean, even in my faith based training, I was taught how to work with an LGBT client respectfully. I mean, you are never going to look in the eyes of somebody that God does not love. And it's easy to start there. But I think that's where we need to find our voice as a group of faith based counselors. Is there's still more of us than there are of them. They're just more vocal. They're more politically active. They're, and we've got to redefine social justice, because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just as much as they can go to a pride parade, I mean, I lobbied the Texas legislature in 2011 over the fetal pain bill, because, the unborn need people fighting for them too. And
Yeah.
social justice, we just have to define what that looks like in a conservative realm, because the vast majority of my clients are in there, not 100%, but 90 plus. And, you know, advocating and getting involved at the public level, at the institutional level. I mean, it
Yes.
can't just be individual anymore, because there really
Y-
are more of us. And we've got to begin to use that voice, because there
yes.
is power in numbers.
And I think this is why on the positive end, like you're saying, some of these files being leaked and everything, the trans issue has been a backfire, I believe, on more of the leftist type of worldview. It's almost like they got a little too greedy on it, because there are plenty of other issues out there that go beyond it, but it's just so basic. I mean, my 4-year-old, she's on a 4-year-old girls soccer team, and they scrimmaged against some of the boys just for a practice. She knew the difference. She knows what a girl is, what a boy is. It's super super easy. Like we don't have to think that deep about it. And it's almost like they try to shove truth out the window a little too hard there, that even people that aren't on the right are like, wait a second, that this might be going a little too far.
You
And
know,
it
and I think that's the beautiful thing, is that who would have thought that the trans issue would be the one thing that united liberals and conservatives? Because so many of the liberals are like, wait, no. Once they saw the leak of the truth coming out, that, I mean, from the people who are creating the standards of care saying, yeah, they don't understand. I mean, come on. Any
Yeah.
professional in the world that deals with people has to understand the point of informed consent, because otherwise, I mean, this is our modern day Tuskegee experiment. You don't get to experiment on humans without their
Yep.
consent and full knowledge of what's happening to them. But here we are. And it has
Yeah.
been the one issue that across the board, one of my friends had sent me a podcast and said, "You really need to listen to this." Now, it's a very liberal podcaster, but hear him out. And I'm like, I'm game, let's go. And I'm like, who would have thought this would be the issue that would unite us, because we're all having the same talking points on this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just because it's so basic to human nature. We know this as a child. Goodness, I have three babies. You change their diaper. It's pretty easy to tell which one's the boy, which one's the girl. It doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal. Like we know that difference, and that is very. It is encouraging in that sense. Not that we're having this problem, but that we're getting more united on it. And
Yeah,
what I'll add with this is whether you're faith based or not, and again, whether you're a counselor or not, when you stick with your values, you know your values well, and you stick with them and put them above being comfortable, put them above your profession, um, things work out a whole lot nicer. Because these things coming out, there's all sorts of lawsuits coming down the pike that are going to be really bad for a lot of people. And I do feel bad for some that maybe were a little late, that thought they were doing the right thing,
yeah,
and realize now that they're not. But when you stick with your values and you know it, I would much rather be fired from a job than to have the guilt of like, oh my goodness, I pushed people into this horrible, terrible thing. And
absolutely.
you're able to sleep a whole lot easier if you just stick with your values than being worried about, yeah, being comfortable and kind of going along with what your profession says.
Absolutely. And so much of this is becoming a socially constructed problem as opposed to an organic problem. When you look at, I mean, Erickson's psychosocial stages, that 11 to 18-year-old span is where they're having confusion versus identity. I mean, this is as old as time that has been in our psychological training. And yet, what we're finding with trans issues and LGBT issues, that they are absolutely targeting that age group where they're already confusion versus identity. And so we are socially constructing a problem that wasn't there before. Now, do
Yeah.
people organically start exploring and identifying gender issues? Well, of course they do. But now that, I mean, I've had a client come in wondering if she was gay because her YouTube channel was starting to gear up towards Pride Month, and there was a "Are you gay?" And so she clicked on it, and now she's wondering if she's gay. And then every video, because of the algorithm, is now telling her she is gay, and she's so
Yeah.
confused. And years ago, I had a client, same kind of issue. He was spending, I mean, every day and evening watching RuPaul makeup artist tip shows, and started thinking he was trans. And my first is, okay, where are you getting your information? What's making you think this? And he starts telling me about his steady diet of these videos and watching. And I'm like, okay, so normally teenagers very much don't like people telling them what to do. Would you fit in that? He goes, oh yeah, I don't like people telling me what to do. I said, were you confused about who you were before you started watching all of this? And he's like, no. I said, tell you what, I'm concerned maybe they're telling you who you are and what you need to do and be, and you've stopped being able to think for yourself. What would you say if you took a 30-day fast of all your viewing materials and started to really think for yourself again and figure out who you are, what you are? But that's a conversation you have with yourself. And he's like, I'll take that challenge. 30 days later, he's like, wow, I didn't even think about it. And I was like, so what did you do with that time that you used to watch that? He goes, well, I actually started doing my homework again. So I mean, truly socially constructed, they are creating a problem and targeting an age group that is vulnerable to that to begin with. And I mean, we've all had training on working with vulnerable populations. You don't go for their Achilles tendon, you know, and that's exactly what we're doing as a profession. We are targeting vulnerable populations with an agenda that was not an issue for them. And so that's pretty disturbing.
Hey, I think that these issues are all obviously incredibly important, and are just problems that, again, a good chunk of the even counseling population, they may know about, but maybe not know quite the severity, maybe not know quite the issues at play here. So I would love, for the audience that are listening to this to be able to know more about your book, know how to be in contact with you after the show. So yeah, how can people find out more about your book, and yeah, be able to contact you later?
Actually need to get a website for that book, but in the meantime, I can give you an email address. Um, we're hoping to have the launch date, give or take, around May 6th. We're in the final editing and book art right now with the cover work. We're getting all that together. So it should be available on Amazon, and I can let you know the release date because I think for the first 24 to 48 hours we'll have it on sale.
Mhm.
And I will definitely, once we get the website up and going, get that to you because right now I just have my business website, but
Yeah.
we'll get one specific for the book.
Great. Well, I'll say this too. These, when we air these, they generally, there's a little bit of a buffer between when it actually goes live. So I'll get with Dawn as well if anything has changed from when this has, like, maybe the website's up by the time that this is live. If that's the case, I'll have that down in the show notes. But I'll also have contact information for Dawn down there that you guys can be in contact with her. And yeah, it sounds like this book is going to be a really important read. So thank you again, Dawn, for being on and just sharing all this great information with us.
Thank you for the invite. This has been
Absolutely.
good.
And yes. And thank you to everybody that joined in with us today. And we'll catch you on the next episode.